بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So today another one of our kind of miscellaneous topics, which is obviously very essential, which is childbearing. So we want to talk about the goals of Islamic marriage, pregnancy and childbearing. So first of all, goals. So it's very important to understand that the primary goal of Islamic marriage is nikah. In Arabic, nikah means marriage and it means intercourse. And it is so the primary goal of an Islamic marriage is intercourse. Why do I say that? Because when we see the ahadith and see the verses of the Quran and see how the fuqaha talk about it, the primary goal of marriage is not to have children. Right? So here, for example, look at this hadith. O youth, whoever among you can marry should marry, because it helps him lower his gaze and guard his modesty. Is the hadith talking about having children? No. Is the hadith about falling in love? No. It is on a very basic level, it is the physical necessity and need to have halal intercourse. That's what it is. That's what it says. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the context of fasting. It says, it has been made permissible for you to be intimate with your wives during the nights preceding the fast. Previously it was haram that once you go to sleep you can't have intercourse. Your spouses are a garment for you, as are you for them. Right? You are a garment. The context is intercourse. Right? So here it is not, the marriage is needed in order for them to feel connected. They feel connected, they're married. So what is this silly, immature thing, quote in quotes, that these people need during Ramadan is they need to be intimate. Because intimacy is a garment, is a protection, is a comfort, right? Hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahun. You both need that. Husband and wife both need that, and that is a primal goal of marriage. And the Prophet ﷺ said, when a woman fascinates any one of you and captivates his heart, he should go to his wife and have intercourse with her, for it would repel what he feels. Same thing for her, exactly the same thing. It is normal and natural to be attracted to the opposite sex, and so there is a need to fulfill this in a halal way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is through marriage. So, right? These are all things we quoted before. We're quoting again. Abu Muslim al-Khawlani, he said, O tribe, one of the Salaf, he said, O tribe of Khawlan, marry off your women and unmarried men, i.e. make sure that everybody who is unmarried gets married. And erection is a troublesome matter, so deal with it properly. So he sounds a bit stupid, but it's actually not. What he's talking about is, here are young people, they have sexual needs, and if these things are not managed properly, they will be managed improperly, right? And deal with so properly. Remember that someone with an erection does not have ears or does not have permission. Two versions of the hadith, udhun and idhan, like he's not thinking anymore. Sexual drive is not thinking anymore, not listening to is this halal or haram, so they're the same kind of concept. So this is a reality. So a primal goal of marriage then is intercourse itself, right? Making sure that married people are married so that they can have halal intercourse. Al-Kharaiti, he narrates in his I'tilal al-Qulub that a hadith, Allahu A'lam is sahih or not, that the Prophet ﷺ is alleged to have said, youth is a type of insanity, right? Youth is a type of insanity, and women are the snare of the devil. That doesn't make women are bad. We mentioned the hadith similar to this before. What it means is women are used. Turn on the screen. Look at the screen, look on YouTube, look on any advert. See how a woman's body is used. See how a man's body is used sometimes as well. Right? So it's a type of insanity. So it needs to be, here's an insane person, right, who is somewhat insane. We need to control that. And that is normal and natural. We've spoken about that in lesson 1 and lesson 2. It's normal, or lesson 1, sorry. Normal and natural, but it needs to be channeled in the right way. Makhul al-Shami, the great mufti of the Tabi'een in Damascus, he explained the verse of the Quran, right? وَلَا تُحَمِّلْنَا مَا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا بِهِ in Surah Al-Baqarah, and do not burden us with that which we have no power to withstand. What does it mean? It means sexual attraction. You have no power to withstand it. You can't. That's why it's used for advertising, because you can't look away, because you will buy that thing. Inch by inch, you will eventually give in. Right? And so this is so marriage then is a key, this is a reality, this is how humans are. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, marriage, primal goal of marriage, halal intercourse. But if any of you cannot afford to marry a free woman, a free believing woman, then let him marry a believing woman, a believing bondwoman, a slave. This is for those who fear the breaking of bones. What do you mean by the breaking of bones? Why would your bones break? I.e., this person has a sexual need and they are not capable of saying no. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, go and get married. They can't afford to pay the mahar, the dowry of a free woman, so then they're going to pay them the dowry of someone else's female slave. That's who they're going to marry. So the verse of the Quran is acknowledging, again, what we talked about in lesson 1, this need, and it's not making it something silly. So go and get married because this is the sexual need is fulfilled. It is not the need of having children. People have needs to have children. At a certain time in your life, you're like, oh man, I really want to have a child. You know, that's a need. That's true, but it's not the primal need. It's not need number 1, right? Again, in this context, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا, and mankind, and that means male and female, has been created weak when it comes to the opposite sex. It's a weakness. Quote we mentioned before, again, weak hadith, narrated by Ibn Habib and Adab bin Nisa, that 9/10 of all lusts have been given to women. So women have to have an outlet. What is the default goal then for a woman to get married? Is intercourse. That is the default basic goal. Imam al-Bayhaqi narrates with in his Shu'ab al-Iman that from one of the Salaf, from the early Muslims, who said, it is written in the Torah, anyone who does not marry off his daughter by 12 years of age, and then she commits a sin, she commits zina, or perhaps not zina in that sense, but rather zina to herself. Right? Reality, do teenage boys and teenage girls, do they masturbate? Yes. Is that acceptable? That we put them in a situation where they do something haram to themselves? Is that acceptable? The answer is no. The default is they should be married, and so the default goal of marriage is halal sexual intercourse. Right? The sin is only on him. Wallahu a'lam. And so what does Islam want to do? Islam says this is how you are. You're a sexual being, a spiritual sexual being, as explained in lesson 1, and wants you to get married. Once the dunya is in your hand, you are married, intercourse is happening, and people are physically satisfied. It's in their hand, but it's not in their heart, right? Because if the dunya is in your heart, you can be pulled around, right? The media, commercials, TV, social media, wants the dunya to be in your heart. You're not sexually active, right? And so in a halal way, and you're just chasing after stimulus, sexual stimulus in this advert and that advert, little tiny things here and there in this film and that film, all these little things pulling you around, making you think in certain ways. Whereas the deen wants you to be uninterested. I don't care because these things are happening. These things are happening in your life anyways, it's not a big deal, right? And so a primal goal, right? We look at the fuqaha. If somebody can't have a child, you can't annul the marriage. If somebody cannot have intercourse, you could annul the marriage in certain circumstances. So the fuqaha, the way they look at the marriage contract is the primal thing. If you stipulated that you not have intercourse, the marriage will be invalid, right? I hereby marry my daughter on the condition you don't sleep with her. It's not a valid contract. Why? Because they say that condition mitigates the goal of marriage, which is intercourse. Right? So this is not Farid Dingle speaking. This is how the fuqaha look at it, and this is how look at that hadith in the verse of the Quran. That is the primal goal, right? So the primal goal of marriage is halal intimacy. That is the primal goal. Okay, what about emotional stability and emotional fulfillment, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, he says, and among his signs is that he creates complementary pairs, azwaj. Right? Plen means full. You become full through the other person, for you from your very selves. And that he firmly establishes. Ja'ala means to firmly establish. Mawadda, it doesn't say would. Would is love, but mawadda is masdar mimi, it means profound love. And rahmah and kindness between the two. Indeed, in that there are many great signs, ayat, the tankir is for ta'zeem and takthir, for people who reflect. So of the goals of marriage is that you feel loved, that you express love, that you show loyalty. We see this in the Prophet ﷺ, a very loving man, so kind, right? Express those things, right? And the fuqaha talk about this. But is that the primal goal? No, it's actually not the primal goal. The primal goal then, the primary goal, not primal, but primary goal of marriage then is exactly what it says on the can. Nikah means intercourse. So the primal goal of marriage is halal intimacy, intercourse. That is the primal goal. The secondary goal of marriage is children. Okay, where does emotional stability fit in? That is a higher and deeper and essential goal. It's higher because it's on a higher tier, it deals with deeper fiqh and deeper goals in the Sharia. The Sharia doesn't necessarily the court can necessarily interfere with those things, etc. And it is essential in that you can't really have a family without love. It's not going to work. Like if no Muslims love their husbands and wives, it's just dead, right? That's not Islam. The Prophet ﷺ was a loving husband. There was love in the family, all right? People felt love. They saw love. That's essential. It's a need, right? But it is not a primary goal, right? And more to the point, children is not a primary goal. So not having children at all is totally fine. Totally fine. That not being a goal of marriage, because it is a secondary goal of marriage, not a primary goal of marriage. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, marry loving and fertile women because I will boast of your numbers to the other nations of Judgment Day. Meaning the Prophet ﷺ was encouraging us to have lots of children. And the Prophet ﷺ said, marriage, nikah, and I put / intercourse, is of my way, of my sunnah. Whoever does not act according to my way is not of me. Marry because I will boast of your numbers. I want you to have many children to the other nations. Whoever can afford to get married should get married. And the Prophet ﷺ, on many hadith, he encouraged us even to have children, even if we know they're not going to be born. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, by Allah, even a stillborn baby will drag his mother by his umbilical cord to paradise, if she sees it as a way that Allah is saving up a reward for her. So they had this child, the first child, stillborn. Second child, childborn. Should we keep having kids, or is this no, keep doing it. As long as she is not being harmed, you should keep having kids, keep getting pregnant, even if the baby is not going to make it. Even if it's stillborn after every single, she loses a miscarriage every single time. You should still do that. It's still an act of worship, as long as she, the woman, is not being her health is not being harmed. And so the concept of large families, this is the default, right? Sayyidina Anas, he had 80 children and something like 300 grandchildren, right? Sayyidina Ali had at least 30 children. Zubayr ibn Awam, at least 21 children. Sayyidina Uthman, at least 17 children, right? So the default is everybody has large families, as many children as humanly possible. That's the default. And the default then is contraception is disliked. It's not something Islamic, right? It's not, it's not something that's Islamic, because the default is you're supposed to have children, and so contraception works against having children. That's the default. Now, do you need the permission of your spouse to use contraception? It's an issue of debate with respect to the wife. So could a man, for example, the two of them, they don't agree, right? So he has a right to have children, right? So she cannot say, no, I want you to use contraception, physical contraception, or otherwise. Or she's decided unilaterally to use contraception, the coil or something like that, and he's against it. She can't do that. That's not halal, right? Unless she has health issues. So if she has health issues, she says, listen, I cannot get pregnant, it's dangerous for me. Obviously, in that which case, even if he insists, right, she can do whatever she needs to protect her health, right? But let's say vice versa. She wants to have another baby, and he doesn't. He's like, that's it. They say, don't have children after 30. That's the joke goes. Don't have children after 30. 30 is a good number, right? So they're on child 30, and he's like, that's it. We cannot have any more children. She's, no, I want to have 31. Is it halal or is it haram? Is it a right that she has? Is that I want to have as many children as I can for my dunya and for my akhirah? Right? Can he do that? It's an issue of debate among the fuqaha. But in general, we should be careful, and men should say, well, okay, I look at the situation from an ukhrawi point of view and try and, from a otherworldly point of view, and try and be as reasonable as possible, while bearing in mind that some decisions are unwise, and he does need to take that responsibility to say no here and there. So the default is then contraception is not a good thing, but there are certain scenarios where it is a good thing. For her health, right, it could be obligatory, it could be haram to get pregnant, or intentionally haram. To intentionally get pregnant, even though you know it's going to harm her, that's going to be, that's haram to do that. So for health reasons, the quality of the relationship, right? So they had a baby. After the baby, things were really rocky between the two of them. They said they're going to get back together again, and they said just no children for a bit, right? So the quality of the relationship is getting really, really hard. They have 4 kids. It's really, really hard. So health reasons, she's fine, everyone's fine, but just for the quality of the relationship, they're saying let's not have any children. That's a good idea. The rights of the other children, have too many children, not looking after them, right? So, they say it takes a village to raise a child. So, mashallah, you have a whole community, you have extended family, you have 8 children, and everyone's helping out, and it's great, and everybody feels loved, and etc. That's fine. But you might not have a community, you might not have in-laws that you get on with, or that works out, who are religious, and it's just you and her, or the two of you. And you actually need to spend time with these kids and help them in their deen. And so having another child is probably not a good idea, right? And so in terms of responsibilities, this is an important question. Who's responsible? Like when you have a baby, is it just basically the man comes along, impregnates a woman, and says goodbye, see you later? Is that how it works? Right? So intimacy is a responsibility, a right and a responsibility of a woman, meaning all things being equal, she is obliged to be intimate with her husband, and it's also she has a right to be intimate with her husband, right? Getting pregnant is a right that he has on her. If she's physically able to get pregnant, that he has a right that she gets pregnant, right? And it's also a right that she has to get pregnant. She has a right to get pregnant, and we mentioned the debate there, and it's also an obligation, all things being equal. The obligation to give birth, I don't think she really chooses whether she wants to give birth or not, but the point is, that's something that's her responsibility, giving birth, right? But now gets the interesting point. She's now given birth. What is the next obligation? Next obligation is to give the colostrum, which is the first milk that comes, right? Okay, what's next then? Does she have to feed the baby thereafter? Does she have to change the baby thereafter? Does she have to look after the baby thereafter? Whose responsibility is that? So for many of us, the assumption in our cultural understanding of Islam is obviously that's the woman's job, right? Like, how could she not do that? How could she not do that, right? Even as a Westerner, like you don't change your baby ever, like you don't do anything. The default, right, is that's not the obligation of the woman at all. The default is that that's not the obligation of the woman. And this is an important discussion because here is this woman, she has a baby, and then she has the kitchen, and then she has this, and then she has that, and the house. And then the husband's going to come home and say, oh, you have to obey me, you have to give me my conjugal rights, and all of these things. And so a very key thing, your wife is not your slave. Your wife is not your slave. And in fact, even your slave, there's limits. So the Prophet ﷺ said in the context of slaves, it says, do not ask your slaves, have your slaves do more than they can do. And if you ask them to do something, then help them. So the same thing, by a fortiori, by a better right with your wife is not your slave. The default is she's not obliged to do anything other than give birth and give that initial milk. That is the default. Intimacy, give birth, initial milk. That's it. Job done. The default is that feeding the baby, changing the baby, looking after the baby, waking up for the baby is the man's responsibility. That's his thing. So by default, it's either he does it or he gets the job done. He has a nanny to do it. It's not her obligation by default. We go to the next stage, educating the child, raising the child, being the spiritual guide, who's supposed to teach them the prayer, who's supposed to take them to school, dropping off to school, taking back to school, taking to tennis, coming back from tennis. Whose responsibility is that by default? It is not the woman's responsibility. That's not her responsibility by default. Rather, that is the man's responsibility. Okay? That is the man's responsibility. Every single thing is on the man by default. What is on the woman? Intercourse, pregnancy, giving birth, colostrum. End of job done. That is her job done. Right? And if you're a woman, you'll understand there's quite a lot of work to be done anyway. So here we are in the 21st century. I was going to title this slide Western Muslims. It's not really true. It's actually the 21st century. Right? 21st century, there are certain financial realities. Many women have to work. Many, if not most families, cannot survive on a single income. So this thing makes things a little bit complex. It makes it complex because suddenly I have to give birth, I have to be intimate, I have to be available for my husband, I have to give birth, I have to do this for the baby and that for this and all these different things. And I have to work a full-time job like he does. And then when he comes home, he doesn't do anything and I have to do all of these things. Is that fair? Right? Okay, now we flip it on him and say, actually, I'm not going to do any of these things. He's like, well, here's the reality of life. I can't afford to pay the rent or pay for the payments in the house and the payments on the car without you working. So she says, okay, fine, find a maid. How am I supposed to do that? I live in a country where there's a large middle class, right? The gap between the classes is not so huge. If you live in a country where having a maid is cheap, okay, that would make sense. If you live in a time where you have slaves, okay, yeah, well, you have 3 slaves, and I was used to having a maid growing up, etc. So the concept of just realities of things, right, makes it quite complex. It's complex for her because I have to work, and then I have to do all these things as well. And then for him, it makes it complex because I can't. You have to work because I can't afford to do these things. Now you're asking me to have a maid do these things, or I'm going to do these things. What am I supposed to do? Be in 3 places at once? So it is a complex situation. It is a complex. It's not something easy. However, the default is important to understand. The default is the man has to do everything. That's the default. And the default is the woman is intimacy and pregnancy. That is the default. So it's important to know where we start. Right? That's the important thing, to know where we start. Right? That's where we're starting from. Okay? And so now when you say non-default, he tells his wife, well, I want you to pick up the baby. So now, does she have to pick up the baby? Yes. And he tells her, I want you to change the baby. Does he have to do that? Yes. Well, within reason. Right? Within reason. So I want you to wake up 20 times tonight, change the baby, and go to work and come back. Like, how are you supposed to do everything? Right? So for many men, and we spoke about that in the issue about divorce, about concept of being pragmatically aware, you ask people to do impossible things. So you're asking me to work 9 to 5, to go to commute like you do. and to come pick up the kids from school, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then be available also at night to do this and this and this and this and this. There is a problem. So the default is important to understand. Woman's responsibility by default. Through the marriage, she was responsible to make herself physically available for her husband. Through the marriage, what did she agree on? The default is to be intimate, to get pregnant, to deliver the baby, to give colostrum. That is the default. Everything else by default was on the man. Now he tells her, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. Fine, she can take on within reason what is actually doable. Not by default, she has to juggle 50,000 things. That is not the default. That's very important. It's very important to understand that. So our task, this is for people in the West and the East, it's kind of become one thing, is to create a healthy Islamic culture based on your realities, what's actually happening, right? You start from the default and you build up from there. And in lieu of that system that doesn't exist yet, it's actually a confusion and it actually causes problems. We have to do premarital counseling. It's very important, right? Premarital counseling is extremely important because there isn't a clear a matrix of responsibilities and expectations, right? The default that the Sharia gives us is useful. That's where we start with, but is actually not possible for most people, okay? I live in a place where there is where there's huge gap between there's a small lower class, so I'm super wealthy. I married somebody, she had maids growing up, fantastic. Then I understood. She married, she got up, and she's like, yeah, I never made my breakfast in my life, and it's just normal, So it's clear in her head what she's expected to do. What I have to do is look, be here, be pretty, give birth. That's all. Done. Thank you very much. Right? And she doesn't have to worry about waking up at night. She doesn't have to changing the baby during the day. She just enjoys the baby whenever she wants to, and that's fine. It's a clear picture, right? For certain people. But for many people, many Muslims in the 21st century, it is not a clear matrix of responsibilities and things, how it works out. So that's why, particularly when you're marrying, what is the agreement? Is she finishing her master's? Is she going to have a child? She's not going to have a child. Give me a picture of the day in and day out of this world. And it's obviously difficult to do because you've never been married and you don't know what you're talking about, right? Or your parents have a system and that didn't work anyway. And her parents didn't make it. So what you do is you sit there and you have somebody who's a professional and they're like, you know what, let's discuss this situation, this situation, this situation. You are in Manhattan. This is the cost of life. Obviously, having a maid is not something that's going to happen. So these are these tasks. You have 3 kids, 2 of them who are under 2. What are you going to do? How does this work? How are you going to work this out? And so you come up with a system. You're like, oh yeah. And then you've already discussed all of these things. It doesn't cause problems later on. This is a mature way of working, premarital counseling, right? But it's still important to understand where are the goals and priorities. The number one goal of this relationship is what? Number 2 goal was the deeper goal was this. These things are very important, right? And particularly for a woman, and again, inshallah ta'ala, we'll have the tawfiq to do a class on this, is for a woman is the importance of prioritizing things. That here's this man, he's telling me to do this. Here are these expectations in my society, expectations of friends, it's like, what is my priority here? I need to go through life and die and stand before Allah and say, oh Allah, the things that you asked me to do, I did them. What were those things? Pray your 5 prayers, check. Fast Ramadan, check. Guard my chastity, check. Obey my husband, check. Okay? But when we say obey your husband, I need a priority list because I can't do everything. Particularly when you ask me to do A, B, and C, and then you want me to be intimate. How is that possible? How is that possible? A 20-hour shift and then be, what's it called? The dream of the bedroom. It's not possible. So we need to. That's why you say you prioritize, and then in those priorities you prioritize. Like, okay, you, my husband, are asking me to do this, this. I will do every single thing I can do, but give me a system of prioritization so that I can prioritize what you want, right? Because by default, I'm not obliged to do this. And that's very important. So inshallah, we'll have a class one day on managing your managers, right? Managing your husband and making that priority in place with a lot of other priorities. And again, this whole concept of priorities we talk about in the class on how to get married in Islam. And priority number one actually is yourself before your husband. But your husband before your kids, that's the important thing to understand, right? But this is very important. It's important to understand, where do we start? Where's priority number one and then priority number two, and then organizing those things properly. To conclude, we just want to add something. Again, this is a whole course really, but just some key things. Childbearing or child rearing really. First of all, starts with marriage for the sake of Allah. You didn't get married for the sake of Allah. It was a haram relationship that was corrected. It was something created by society. You basically married the best looking person out there, or you married the wealthiest person out there, or whatever it is, something stupid, may Allah forgive us all. That's a good way to not have righteous children, right? So step number one, why did you decide to get married? For the sake of Allah. Who did you marry? Somebody for the sake of Allah. You married a righteous person. That was number one. Number two, throughout your life and in your marriage, it's a thing of personal change. You're continually day in, day out saying, Astaghfirullah, Ya Allah, I've messed up today, but tomorrow I will do this. And you're trying to find your errors and trying to change. That's now going to be reflected onto your child because it's barakah, right? There's barakah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Surah Nuh. You want to have children? فَقُلْ تَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ غَفَارًا يُرْسِلِ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا. Right? Seek forgiveness, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَيُمْدِدْكُمْ بِأَمْوَالٍ وَبَنِينَ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ جَنَّاتٍ وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ أَنْهَارًا. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that you want to have children, you want to have a good life, do istighfar. I want to change, not just astaghfirullah, 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 I'm looking at the haram, but this person is generally wanting to change. That from today, and from they listened to a lecture and that changed them, they did something different, as opposed to, oh yeah, I just like halal entertainment. This, right? They want to change. This person is actually a changing person, number one. Part and parcel of that, then you're trying to fix your marriage. If you're not trying to fix your marriage, forget about it. I want to have righteous children. Yeah, but you can't be bothered to have righteous children. What do you mean? Because you're not trying to work out things with your wife or your husband. You're not trying to work it out. You don't care. You're like, oh, she's just like that. He's just like that. Okay, well, work it out. I don't know how to work it out. I don't know either. But you have to be trying to work out your marriage. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, there's no such thing as righteous children if you're not trying to work things out. Halal income. You are feeding your children haram money. Food from haram. The house is bought in a haram way. The money is coming from a haram way. That doesn't make any sense. Right? We have to be very, very careful about the income that comes in. Even if it's a small amount of money that is halal, that's much better than haram money that is a lot of money that's coming in the haram. A religious household. Look at the household, what's happening, what's on the screen, what's being said, what's going on. Edit your household. Take the haram out of your household, put the halal in, right? Religious friends and environment. Number one thing you're trying to do is surround your children with religious friends, religious environment. It doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what sacrifice you have to do. The number one thing is you're trying to say, I want my kids, they wake up in the morning, what's happening around them? Deen. What's happening around them? Deen. Okay? Something halal and balanced and etc. Protection from the screen, right? The computer screen, the iPhone, the tablet, the TV. It's a huge shaitan. It's like a black hole, a cesspit, like a sewage coming into us. So you have a child who has unlimited access to a screen. Dream on, basically. You're not doing your job at all as a parent, guaranteed, right? It's better to have a kid that smokes than who has access to an iPhone. I'm not a hyperbole, right? It's not a hyperbole, right? How far is smoking going to get you? It's not that far, right? It's not that far. The screen is going to get you very far into the haram. Super, all right? Changes your way you think, your values, every single thing. The screen is a huge issue, like a massive issue, right? And somebody who's not aware of that does not understand anything. May Allah protect us all from being active fools. Spelling love properly. How do children spell love? T-I-M-E. Time. Right? If you don't spend time with your kids, forget about it. Pray. Why would I pray? I never see you. Don't lie. Why would I not lie? I never see you. I don't even know you. You don't invest in me. Why would I invest in you? Why would I invest in something you think is relevant? So you can't just send your kids to maktab. Okay, go and do a Quran class, and then hey presto, it doesn't work like that. Right? You're gonna have to make a lot of life change decisions to enable yourself to have time with your kids, so that when you tell them pray, do this, they actually listen. Reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So after you do all of these things, then you gotta rely on Allah. Right? So we spoke about in Femina, we spoke about all of these things, and all of these things have to be taken into consideration, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.